Desert Treasure 2 was released July 26, 2023, bringing with it 4 new repeatable solo bosses. Each of these bosses, Vardorvis, the Leviathan, Duke Succulus, and the Whisperer, became some of the best solo bosses to do for GP in the game. In this video, I'm going to look at each boss's mechanics, their loot, and their integration with the rest of the game. One of the greatest strengths of Old School Rune Scape is the complexity that emerges from simple systems. You have movement, damage per second, prayers, and resource management. By layering these systems on top of one another, the encounters become more challenging without becoming overwhelming, since each system in isolation can be understood quite simply. This allows players to learn one system at a time. While perfect kills require all systems to be done correctly, failing on one of them does not end the run. Instead, players are punished with health or prayer points when they fail a certain system. But by doing one correctly, it makes the other systems easier to learn. Gradually, all the systems come together, allowing for a complex and rewarding encounter. 3 of the 4 bosses do consistent chip damage, whereas the Whisperer drains a lot of prayer. However, each boss encounter has a built-in time period where resources can be used to restore prayer and health. The Duke's stare attack requires players to hide behind a pillar, giving them time to eat and drink potions. Vardorvis's capture attack allows a double eat or even a eat and a potion sip. The Whisperer's specials are always followed by a brief pause, allowing for inventory and resource management. The Leviathan can be stunned with a shadow spell, allowing players to eat and restore prayer while moving to its weak spot. These brief pauses in the fight don't feel like dead time, since the player can still manage their resources during them. Finally, the enraged phases are wonderful additions to the fights. The Leviathan's enraged phase feels great, since if you do it correctly, you will be consistently hitting very high and accurately. The Whisperer's enraged phase feels like an improved version of the Phantom Muspa's dodging phase. Instead of standing still to dodge everything, movement and correct prayers become even more important in the time-restricted final phase. Each boss drops a unique ring and an untradeable axe piece at the same drop rate. The Virtus Robe pieces are shared on all of the boss's drop tables, meaning that if you are grinding for the axe, you are likely to get a few Virtus pieces despite their high drop rate from any one single boss. Each of the rings has a unique drop mechanic that has never been seen before in RuneScape. You must first get 2 invisible rolls on the ring drop table before the third becomes a visible drop. The invisible ring drops prevent someone from going super dry, but also prevents them from getting very spooned. Each boss also drops an untradeable piece of the Soul Reaper axe. This encourages players to interact with all of the new bosses for a big payoff once all 4 pieces are collected. Since the rings and the axe pieces are at the same drop rate, you are likely to get both by the time you are finished with one of the bosses. Players are also rewarded for doing all of the boss mechanics correctly, as a perfect kill will increase the standard loot drops from each of the bosses. This means that there's an actual tangible reward for doing a perfect kill, instead of just not using as many resources or having a faster kill time. While not all of the loot drops are valuable, the consistency of high-value drops, like Awakener's Orbs and high GP standard loot, is enough to keep the grind from feeling empty. In the past few years of Old School, there's been a desire to have side grades and niche items rather than best-in-slot upgrades. Following this, the Desert Treasure 2 bosses brought niche items into the spotlight. The Webweaver Bow's special attack speeds up the Leviathan's enraged phase quite a bit. The Venator Bow destroys the Whisperer's ghost phase. And the Soul Reaper axe is best in slot for the entire Vardorvis fight. The emphasis on making these weapons relevant works to balance best in slot gear against niche gear with strong use cases. The story for Desert Treasure 2 feels like it was building up for a long time. The Duke is right next to the Phantom Muspa. The Leviathan is reached through Guardians of the Rift, resolving that storyline. The Whisperer is under Camdozel, making a free-to-play piece of content something that pay-to-play players actually see. Vardorvis is in the Stranglewood, an area connected to the upcoming continent of Varlamore. The story isn't done either. The end of Desert Treasure 2 suggests another follow-up quest yet to be announced. Finally, All 4 of the bosses appeal to both middle and end-game players. The standard fights of all of these bosses provide a challenge, but an attainable goal for mid-game players. The awakened versions of these bosses provide aspirational content for end-game players. I like seeing the trend of Jagex trying to appeal to a wider variety of players. Some MMOs get caught up in the idea that their longest and most enfranchised players are the ones they need to be appealing to. However, for an MMO to grow, you need to appeal to both newer and older players, so that nobody feels left out of the group. In conclusion, Desert Treasure 2 was not hastily put together. From the mechanics, to the loot, to the integration with existing content, Desert Treasure 2 took a lot of care and planning. This gives me confidence in Jagex and their ability to keep the balance of the game while adding fresh content. I'm excited that the new continent of Varlamore is being introduced with content aimed at players of all skill levels and points in their account progression. And looking at our active player count shows how popular this balanced approach to design really is. Thank you for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Desert Treasure 2 and its bosses, as well as the future content of OSRS. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out my other content, and subscribe if you like what you see. And as always, have a wonderful rest of your day.